talk about UFOs. But I'm going to start. I'm going to start with you. So we saw this incredible footage 2 years ago with Navy pilots picking up things on radar that they just couldn't explain. And it was remarkable. What was remarkable yesterday was that you actually had these Navy pilots speaking on the record. And your headline is UFOs exist and everyone needs to adjust to that fact. Of course, UFO may not mean exactly what it means in popular culture. But you bring up a great point. These Navy pilots and others have been talking about this for some time.
Right. So in some ways, the trick of the headline is that when I say UFOs exist, everyone, particularly people our age, if you say UFO, everyone immediately goes to extraterrestrial or alien. But that's not what UFO means. UFO is a term that the Air Force created that literally means unidentified flying object. We don't know what it means. And there's a fair amount of evidence now that clearly UFOs exist. And the fact that Navy pilots are willing to go on record to say that is encouraging, because for the longest time, if you said the word UFO or if you said you believed in UFOs, then it meant you were sort of relegated to sort of conspiracy theorizing or sort of a crackpot. And it was very easy for the establishment to sort of not take you seriously anymore. And one of the things that I think the Defense Department has done with programs like the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program and others is they're basically trying to say, look, we acknowledge that UFOs as we understand them exist, and we need to get more data on this, because clearly these pilots saw enough of them, and indeed I believe one of them reported almost a near-air collision with one of them, that you want them to actually be willing to come forward and say these things without the stigma that has historically been associated with the acronym UFO. And I think that's all to the good.
So, Dan, a lot of this comes out of that extraordinary New York Times piece where you have these two Navy pilots who say from the summer of 2014 to the spring of 2015, almost 9 months, they saw UFOs almost every day over Virginia and Florida along the East Coast. So the question for a lot of people is, do we know what they were? What were those unidentified flying objects? Or at least, what are the suspicions of the Navy about what they were?
I mean, obviously, again, the U stands for unidentified, so it's not clear what it is. And there's a fair amount of debate, as near as I can figure out, as to what they are. One obvious possibility, and the most, that comes to mind, is that there's some form of drone. But from what I've read, it doesn't sound like, countries like Russia or China would necessarily have the capacity to produce drones that generated those kinds of flight maneuvers. But that said, it's worth bearing in mind. I don't know the first time you ever saw a drone flying around at night, particularly where you would only see the lights. It looks weird. It looks very different from what you would normally see if you saw a plane flying overhead. And so it's not surprising that you're going to see reactions that are along the lines of, we don't know what this is.
That said, Dan, if you talk to if you listen to what the Navy pilots say, they just say that there are not jets, or there are not drones that can move this quickly, that can stop on a dime. As one of the Navy pilots said, it's not the acceleration that kills you, it's the stopping suddenly that kills you. And that's what these objects are able to do, and then turn up sideways. And it's all on the video. Pretty remarkable.
Right. And so the fact is that, it's one of these things where you need to try at least to rule out all the plausible things. I mean, the other thing I've heard suggested is that it's actually a U.S. government research program, that it's simply that these pilots don't, necessarily know about it, although that seems somewhat far-fetched, but probably less far-fetched than the alternatives that everyone's mind is going to go to. So I think the important point is we need to recognize we don't know at this point, and therefore we need to investigate further.
Daniel Drezner, thank you. The truth is out there somewhere. Vali Nasser, thank you as well. Remember the drone you got for Jack?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't have a lot of luck with drones.
For
I didn't
20
either.
seconds.
First flight landed in a tree.
It's sort of like those scenes from a North Korean missile test gone terribly wrong. It just explodes on the launch pad. Exactly. I took it to the top of trees. It just fascinating.
Up next, we'll be joined by a woman.
I think actually putting the live hand grenade on the bottom of it and flying it through the neighborhood.
A little aggressive.
That was a little aggressive. But I thought it would balance. I thought it would balance it out.
Good thing we moved.
It just took it straight down.